digital transformation. IT and marketing must work together when it comes to democratizing data. You agree? Maybe you want to have answered the questions, what's the best strategy? Which are the key instruments for achieving your goals? These questions will be answered by two gentlemen and much more, and they will join us now live. I want to say hello to Thomas Beetschen. There he is from Mondelez International. Hi, Thomas. And Tyler Pietz from MightyHive. Hello.
Hello.
Where do I reach you? Where are you located at the moment?
I am in Los Angeles at the moment.
Wow. And Thomas?
I am in Chester in the United Kingdom right now.
Something like this is only possible in 2020. What a year. Not at all, but this year we have that more and more. So I'm looking forward to your chat and see you in some minutes.
Great. So Thomas, you very helpfully have your background here. So if any of the participants didn't know about Mondelez International, hopefully some of the amazing brands that are highlighted there will remind them. But maybe you can just start us off by telling everyone a little bit about what makes Mondelez unique as a business. I know you talk a lot about 100 billion, 1001. Maybe you can use that to explain to our attendees what makes Mondelez unique when we think about digital transformation and the use of data and marketing.
Sure. And thank you for the opportunity, Tyler. I think first, very, very briefly, Mondelez is about empowering people to snack right. So a lot of our brands, you can see some of here, are brands that everybody will know, and they represent cookies and chocolate and chewing gum all across the world. What we really try to do is delight our consumers in every single market where we are. Now, going back to your questions about the numbers, and the context for digital transformation and marketing digital transformation is on one hand, we have 100 billions of ad impressions. We also have hundreds of billions of single products that get consumed by our consumers across the globe all the time. And that's a significant amount of very granular piece of information. And on the other hand, every single of those products gets sold quite often for about one, whether it's €1, $1, £1, that's quite often the kind of the price point. And that's quite important in the context of the transformation. We'll talk about it a bit later. And the 1,000 is, we have about 1,000 brand country combinations. That sounds actually quite a lot, and it is. So that means we also run about 1,000 campaign every year. So what we do not have is a very simple landscape where we have one mega brand that we take everywhere in this very similar way all the time. We always try to adapt to the local market, and we do that in a scale opportunity as much as we can.
Got it. Okay. So with so many brands, such high volume, lower unit costs, compared to something such as an automobile or a durable good such as a television, you must have a lot of kind of hyper granular events that are influencing the purchase journey, lots of purchases across many brands. Can you tell us a little bit about how you balance the trade-off between sort of a singular approach, maybe like a global approach that's more top-down, versus a local approach that speaks to the unique nature of each one of those brands, all of the different markets that you operate in?
Sure. So I think we try to balance the local specificities. The consumers are not the same, the behaviors are not the same, the cultural setup aren't the same, with every opportunity we have to scale, because to some extent, one of our strengths is that ability to scale. So I think when we look at finding something very close to the consumer need, very empathetic with their requirements, we use the content and the kind of the messages that we produce, and we use the personas, the audiences. We find a way to kind of recognize them. That always happens at local level and is very, very specific. And we have absolutely no intention to have like a one size fits all. On the other hand, the more we have opportunity to scale across genuinely global dimensions. Think about it at the Google platform, the Facebook platform. We've centralized a number of our agency ecosystem to a very small number of very, very key partners. Then those are places where we can create those synergies. And the whole challenge in the digital transformation is to group all of those different local capabilities into archetype, into groups that we can then deploy at speed. So one of the key things that we will do, for instance, is as part of our collaboration with a Google or a Facebook, come up with some key best practice, come up with some key capability of integrating the data, and then standardizing that, rolling that out in the back office so that then the marketers locally, the agency locally can use this, don't have to reinvent this, can benefit from the best solution we've got across the globe, and then apply it to something you need that will be a biscuit in Singapore, will be a piece of gum in South Africa, or a piece of chocolate in Brazil, for instance.
Got it. Okay. So it sounds like you've taken the approach of really kind of defining key partnerships at a global level, but then really doing the hard work to ensure that those are adaptable and transferable to the local market so that they can translate their business objectives, knowing the reality on the ground, to excellence in marketing and a really personalized approach to how you interact with consumers. So I think one of the dynamics that's really interesting here is, a lot of kind of ad tech is really predicated on this idea of conversions and driving sales. And as a manufacturer with such a wide distribution footprint, but ultimately relying on a network of primarily bricks and mortar retailers, it makes the dynamics a little bit different in terms of how you evaluate your campaigns, how you use that information to make optimizations, and the dynamics are just very different than say a direct response advertiser. So can you tell us a little bit about sort of what Mondelez's approach to data has been, and really just how you think about digital writ large, and perhaps start to weave in, what you've seen your peer set do, and how your approach is different from that?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a couple of different things. The first one is going back to the billions of interactions, the number of different brands, and the fact that there is no major purchasing moment for a $10,000 car or something like that. So also we do have a view of a consumer journey in the way we construct our marketing campaigns. What we don't have is a direct traceable consumer journey that leads to a purchase. We have an hyper granular approach to this. The other piece is, to your point, the vast majority of the point of buying is outside of our control. So we cannot rely on that. We have to find alternatives to that. One of the things that we've really worked on is worked on the assumption that every time there is a digital interaction between a consumer and one of our brands, to some extent, we've invested into making that interaction happen. And as a result, we know that data is being captured, data is being generated at that interface, and we're entitled to actually be able to access and use that information. Obviously, within all of the legal framework that we would expect, but we still look at it and says, how do we make sure that we can capitalize on that piece of information? And really the way to look at this is a very nebulous way of looking at the information. It's not a funnel. The funnel has little value for us. It's genuinely how do we bring into relative similar dimensions, our brands, our personas, all of those pieces of information. And we do that through something we've called the data spine, which is a simple word that enable us to talk about all of the technologies, all of the processes that MightyHive help us kind of building in terms of getting into that place. And that data spine really helps the collection of that information, making sure that information is clean, and that when you deal with the 100 billions of information, having information that is usable, that algorithm can prey upon is very, very important. We then store it in places that make sense for us, depending local, global, or sometimes regional. And then most importantly, we then play it back. So the reason we do all of this is to have that information that then help the next activation, the next decision on which platform should we place an advertisement. Should we go CRM? Should we go paid media? So very much a kind of a virtuous cycle that we're starting to bring in. And again, it's quite hard for a relatively small business unit or a small brand to invest in those capabilities, but we invest in those once, and then we really roll them out to make sure everybody can benefit from it.
Got it. Okay. So one of the things that we've certainly noticed in kind of the difference in working with Mondelez versus other global fast-moving consumer goods companies is you've been extraordinarily successful in taking an organization that perhaps didn't have some of these fundamentals within inside its own walls. And if we look back 3 years and kind of what the evolution has been, the success that you've had in really not only building this capability, but retuning the organization itself and the people in it to really think with this data-driven mindset and get used to an entirely new way of working. What advice would you have for, perhaps other CPG marketers that sit within the marketing or media departments, or other folks that are more on the IT or the internal services side of the house, when they're starting off on this journey, getting to a point where they can credibly say that they have, a team of people globally and all of their agencies operating in a fashion that yields excellence? How did you make that transition, and what suggestions would you have for other organizations that are looking to do that?
I think the first one is don't try to copy somebody else. It's unlikely their model will work. So we were very, very specific in looking at what's unique to us. Snacking is different. Our size is different. Our way to aggregate and get coalescent around some big platforms is unique. So I think there is no blanket digital transformation solutions. And if somebody's telling you one, just don't buy it. The other piece is, to some extent, just never say data. When somebody says data and doesn't actually qualify it, is that a consumer data? Is that a customer data? Is that a website data? Actually, I don't think they know what they're talking about, because the tools, the solution, the process that need to be used behind it are very different. So it's getting into the granular level and understanding which piece of the process, which piece of the data set needs to be addressed and how. The other piece I would say is, and that's something that we've done, is to look across two different dimensions. A use case dimension. So have a pretty good idea of what would you do if you had some data, but at the same time, the fundamental dimensions. So because most of the use case, you can't foresee them. By the time you get to be capable of using them, they're obsolete anyway. So it's really an ability to kind of like work that fine lines between building a capability with a bit of faith and also having some specific use case on the way that helps you put some scores on the board. So I think that's an important piece. And then the other one is don't own everything. I think as a client, work out through the processes, which pieces you really need to own as a client, which processes you take part into, and therefore you just need to comply and make the right choice on the technology, the right choice on the governance, and the right choice on the partners that you go with and kind of collaborate with. But I think that's how I would probably go and look. And that's what we've done. And we then keep applying it to new area that we get closer to. So we focused on paid media a lot, web. We're now looking at some of the consumer centricity, some of the content performance, and applying the same kind of methodology, but actually it's realized in a different way.
Right. So it sounds like you had to make some hard decisions from the outset in terms of the space that you really wanted to focus on, take ownership of, and then ultimately how you wanted to carry those capabilities forward in terms of use cases, really identifying some ambitions, but also being flexible, knowing that part of it was just going to be that process of smashing atoms and then figuring out what to do with the bits later. So that's really interesting. Let's end on, tell us a little bit about what else is on Mondelez's roadmap in the future, whatever you can share. So you've gone through this process of really getting all of your data into a consistent format, rolling out processes that ensure the consistency coming in, building capabilities for the rest of the organization to consume that. What do you see as being the kind of the critical priorities on the horizon? Particularly given some of the shifts in privacy regulation and changes to technology. How do you see Mondelez's relationship with its consumers and the way that you communicate with them changing over the next 5 or so years?
So I think for us, You're right. On the kind of an engagement side with the consumers, that's an area that is of importance for us, and at the same time not absolutely primordial to our business model. So what we've been getting very good at is understanding which type of use cases, which type of engagement should be the right one. I think we apply the same type of approach to the way we create food and the way we deal with data. So we're quite comfortable with the way we're going about that. But I think it's really starting to bring those things together. And for us, the two big kind of like next steps, I think content is a big one. We really, when we look at content, we know the number of content of assets we're going to have to build within about 2 to 3 years, probably 50 times more than what we do today. And so we want to make sure we've got that capability and that we can manage performance for every single one of those. So that's a big focus of us. And I think then it's really bringing the right set of data set across the enterprise. So some of the things we sometimes start to get into is questions like, how is our media pressure and our field sales pressure kind of like align or not align in a specific market? So this is really, again, something specific to the enterprise, but it requires multiple data spines to be very strong, and then to be able to aggregate up at the enterprise level, to be able then to help prioritizing some resource, some investment, or actually getting away from some geographies or some specific areas. That's what we're working on. And it's a really difficult piece to do, in the sense of there is no real roadmap. And I think, digital transformation, I hate the word, because one, clarify digital, and that's hard, but transformation implies there's the destination. And I think anybody who's saying there is one is probably having a bit of a challenge. So for us, it's really about being able to get ready for the next step and the one after, and then being able to pivot very quickly as well. So very small investments, very strategic ones when we need to make them, and actually not getting too much interested in the shiny object. We're trying to kind of like not do that. So it's a bit boring sometimes, but I think it's quite structured in the way we go about it.
Whoever thought data could be boring? Yeah, I think it's really interesting. It sounds like the key theme for Mondelez is really foundationally transforming the way that it works, does business, communicates with its consumers, and realizing that there's no kind of one size fits all solution to this. The ecosystems are going to continue to adapt, and so you really need to build the ability to adapt versus identify the specific way that you need to adapt. Well, I think that's about it for our time. Thank you so much for joining us. Really enlightening conversation. And I'll hand it back over to the DMEXCO folks for the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas and Tyler, for this inspiring talk. Thanks for the insights. And yes, hopefully see you next year live here in Cologne. All the best, and till next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.